So in this video, I'm going to be putting this guy here back together. I'm going to be putting a cylinder head on it, putting a camshaft in it, and doing the valve clearances. And I'm also going to show you that you don't need any special tools really to be able to do it other than the torque wrench. So the head, I'm not really going to do anything with the head. I'm not going to take the valves out of it and clean them or anything like that, because looking down the ports it's not that bad. So I'm just basically going to clean the carbon off without taking the valves out and then bung it back on. That's just a little wire brush on a Dremel, look. I'm actually trying to get the bits of carbon off just because there's less chance of them getting hot and then causing pre-ignition. So I am going to give it a good clean up, but I'm not taking the valves out. Right, so that's about as far as I'm going with cleaning the head. So get the trusty dowels back in and get the head gasket on. Assuming it'll only go one way, it won't go that way, so flip it up. The writing's pointing upwards, which is normally a good way to tell. It won't go that way, but it will go that way. So you can't really get it on wrong. I'm sure someone could, but there you go. While I remember at this stage as well, I'm going to back the pistons down a bit. It's good practice, so that if you're actually bolting your head on and the valves are actually open because it's got a camshaft in it, there's less chance of them hitting. And when I bolt my rocker gear on, the valves are going to open on this motor, so if the pistons are down in the bore, you're safe. And that must go on there, like that. Looks pretty good. Some dowels. Yeah, nice. Let's bring them up here. Put a trusty screwdriver through. And get some head bolts. I've forgotten something. The runner for the timing chain has to go on. So after watching my own video of taking this apart, I now know that that goes up that way. It's handy making videos so you can reference how things go. Right, that can go in there. That needs to go over there. Come out there like that. Right, let's try that again. Let's get some head bolts. All the washers are accounted for, so they're not in the motor. Right, so that's nipped up. And I'll just turn it over just to make sure everything's still free. Which it is. Right, so now first of all nip them up to 30 Newton meters. I'll do a bit less than that first. And I'm actually going diagonally, working from the inside out. I wouldn't be able to tell you what torque I'm doing until at the moment, but I'm tightening them all up the same amount. The torque wrench is set to 30 Newton meters and it hasn't actually clicked yet. Right, so they're all 30 Newton meters. Now, what we've got to do is we've got to do each of them 150 degrees. So first of all, I'm going to do them 90 degrees. And I'm not using a gauge for this because if it's pretty easy to actually see 90 degrees by eye. Especially if you line your torque wrench up straight to start with. Right, so that's 90 degrees. Now we've got to add another 60 onto that. So what are we doing here? We're doing 60. So that'd be 45 and another 15. $45 and another 15. Right, and then it says check them at 60 Newton meters. I don't use a dial gauge. You can invest in one if you want, but like it doesn't make that much difference. You can feel if they're being torqued up the same amount, and plus like a few degrees here and there isn't going to make any difference because the bolts, it's not that accurate, the degree thing, so you can generally feel when they're all exactly the same. So this guy has to go back in. I remember he wouldn't come out with the camshaft still in, so that can only go up that way. So that's pretty easy. I still haven't found my 5mm Allen key bit. Well, I tell you what, I have found the bit, I just haven't found the bit which holds the bit. The bit holder bit. So this here is the camshaft, and if you have a look around here, there's that centrifugal, whatever you want to call it, bog weight there, and it's on quite a light spring, and what that does is that brings these little plungers in with centrifugal force, so that when you're cranking the engine over, those are actually opening the valve a little bit, so that it's got less compression, so it's easier to crank over, it's easier on a starter motor. And then once the engine's started and running, it's only a very light spring, it actually pulls them in like that, look. So people talk about getting rid of this, but I don't really see the point when it's working properly, because it's a very light spring. It's not going to make, once the engine's running, they're going to be in and they're not going to make any difference. So the only way I can see it causing a problem is if these was to seize up, so I'm not going to touch that. And as you can see, that cam gear is on elongated slots. This is how we get the correct chain tension and adjust the camshaft so it's in exactly the right place. So the camshaft will only go in one way. It's not going to go that way because there's the bearing surface is there, so it has to go there. Now, before we go much further, let's take that out. We need to get the engine pinned at the bottom. Right, what we need to do is we need to get that little hole around here somewhere. and pin it. That lines up with another hole in there. The trouble is the holes are not the same size, so we need to make a tool to fit that. I tried a drill bit before, but then realised them two holes were different. Right, so that inner hole, that's 6.5 mil, and then this outer hole's 8 mil. Right, so what we need to do is we need to make a tool which is 8 mil wide one end, and then 6 mil wide the other end to pin the crankshaft. So several ways to do this. You could actually just grind down this drill bit, which is an 8 mil drill bit, to 6 mil, but I'm going to do it a quicker and easier way. I'm going to get this 8 mil bolt, it's actually an aluminium bolt, and grind that end down to 6 mil. Measure me 6 mil drill bit. Keep an eye on that. There you go, a four-man's lathe. Look at that. Spot on. So right, that flat in the camshaft there has to be level with the cylinder head. Maybe I do have to take this tensioner right out. I think I do, but I can't actually get it in with the camshaft in, so I just need to slacken it, I think. Right, so let's pull him out of the way. Right, it's a bit of a fiddle all this. I don't really understand how it goes in with that tensioner there. Or that guide for the tensioner rather. But it does. Right, it's there like that. Now I can bolt him up, I reckon. And that'll have enough slack in it to move the cam round, I think. So right, let's slip that chain off and get this camshaft in the right place. Roughly, which is there. You see that flat, that has to go along. The special tool is just a piece of metal which fits in there. So right, now let's put the tensioner in and see if that's in the right place. The chain tensioner's back in. Let's turn this engine over and get that slot level. There. What you do need to be careful of is these little dowels here. They're very loose and they actually can come out and fall in the motor, so be careful when you take these bits off and put this stuff back again that they don't fall out. It happened to me on my other motor, so I've still got to retrieve that out of the sump, and not this motor. So the cam's in and the tensioner is tensioned on the chain. I've actually put the lash caps back on the valves. I they've gone back on the same valve they actually came off of, because they are different thicknesses. Right, so these camshaft holders, bearing housings, whatever you want to call them, they will only go back on the way they come off, and there's an arrow pointing forwards, so that one won't go on there. That's that one. So let's get the other one. And these surfaces need to be clean of oil so it bolts down properly. The dowels are in there. Right, for now I'm only going to put this one on, and the rockers are actually marked so they go back on in the right place. That one's exhaust 2, so cylinder number 2 exhaust, so it's this one. But what I'm going to do is I'm not actually going to fit that rocker yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bolt the rocker shaft down, and the inlet one as well, just to hold this down. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust this camshaft without it actually opening the valves. And you get to the bolts from this side, that's why we're only putting this one holder on. So I'm now going to undo these bolts which hold the cam gear. That'll be enough. Right, let's turn this back to the proper place again. Should be about there. What we need to do now is we need to find a piece of metal, or get a piece of metal to the same thickness as that slot, so that we can line that slot up perfectly. So another piece of scrap metal I've got lying around, and that's spot on. Well, it's a little bit loose, but what we can do is we can use, if it's loose, we can use feeler gauges as well. That's going over the engine like that. So now we're going to get the wonderful camshaft aligning tool in there, and as you can see, the camshaft's not straight. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get the camshaft as straight as we can. So I need to turn the engine forwards a bit. That's a lot looser there. Right, so that there is the camshaft dead level. What you can do is you can really go to town to make sure it's level, and actually stick feeler gauges under each side, because there's a little bit slack in it. It's not quite right. Oh, that's pretty good. Just keep turning the engine to the right direction until you get these gaps the same distance to the right side, which is there. So that camshaft now is right where it needs to be. So now I'll slacken this other bolt off, hopefully without the camshaft moving. I don't think it will, because I didn't nip it up that tight. just check that again, make sure it hasn't moved, which it hasn't. So now in theory I should be able to turn the engine over and that camshaft not move around. So what way is it going to go? It's going to try and go that way. If I just jam that in there just to make sure it doesn't. No, it's still too tight. Right, so I'm now going to take the tensioner out, because when the tensioner's in there, the chain is pulling down on the cam and turning the cam at the same time. So I reckon if I take the tensioner out, I should be able to move the gear around without the camshaft moving around. There you go, like that, see? And now, see that the camshaft, the cam gear moves without the cam moving. So what we need to do now is pin the motor at the bottom with our beautiful special pin. So there it is, that's locked in place there. And we'll make sure this is right where it needs to be. This tool's getting a bit slacker now. I need to make a better one really, but this is going to do for demonstration purposes at the moment. You get the idea. This tool needs to be, you see that cam turns really easily like that. So what I might do is actually put the tensioner in now. Right, so I've actually got that tool locked in place with the feeler gauges, which are the same either side, so that's dead level now. And now what I'm going to do is insert, you see that? You see the gear moving around as I insert the tensioner. Insert the tensioner. The gauges are moving around because the camshaft's moving a little bit. We're trying to. Now the tensioner's in. Tighten up before I forget. So now we can get this dead level again, because it moved a little bit then. Right, I was having a little bit of trouble with being able to move the camshaft around once the chain's tensioned up. So what I've done is I've cut a piece of metal which is the right size to actually fit in there and actually hold that tight, to actually hold that square. So this is equivalent to the proper tool. So now you can see that chain slack. I'll put the tensioner in again, and everything should be in the right place. So right, this is all totally level now. So now I can actually just nip up this top bolt, and that will lock the cam gear to the camshaft. So now I can take my pin out of the crankshaft, take these out, and then turn the engine over and tighten the other bolt up. I'm not sure if an aftermarket cam would have that slot in it, because you'd set that up with a dial gauge and you'd actually measure the lift of the lobe in comparison to where the crankshaft is. So I can actually put the other rockers on now. Now them bolts are tight. So exhaust number 1 goes on there. Make sure my lash caps are on there. So now I can nip these all up. These are actually under spring tension on this cylinder here now, so you've got to be a little bit careful and do everything up evenly. If you go too stupid, you can damage your camshaft. And then torque these all up to the correct torque setting. So I think it's 10 Newton meters. It's not very much. I don't have a torque wrench that does 10 Newton meters, but I've torqued so many things up to 10 Newton meters. I know what it feels like. It's not crucial for something like that either. So that's it. They're all in now. We're going to check the valve clearances. So it's basically a case of measuring the clearance between the valve and the rocker arm when it's at the bottom of the camshaft lobe. There's several ways you can do this. On a motor like this, it's pretty good because you can actually look and see when it's right on the bottom. Right, what I do is I turn the engine over until the exhaust valve goes down and comes back up again. Then the inlet valve goes down, and when the inlet valve's down like that, that's when I check it. So the spec is about under 20 for these. I'll try 20. Can't get a 17 in there. Let's go 15. It's actually tight. So 10's too sloppy. 12's too tight, so there'll be about 11. So I'm going to write that in my little chart. They're both about the same. So cylinder number 1 exhaust, they're both 0.11, which I think is a little bit too tight. So I'm going to write all this down and see what it needs to be later. So now to do this valve, the inlet, I'll wait until the exhaust valve just starts to go down, which is there, and I'll measure them there. So that one's 16, the second one's 16, the first one's a bit tighter, and I'll do that with the other cylinder too. Right, so there are the specs for the valve clearances. So this exhaust here is a little bit on the loose side, which I'm not really worried about, and the inlet's on the loose side, which I'm not worried about. The only thing I am worried about is this exhaust here is a little bit on the tight side, so I really want to try and sort that out. But I don't have a selection of shims. I do have the other engine, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the shims out, see what sizes they are and the other shims I've got, and then try and make the best option out of all of them. So you can probably see them numbers better on the shims now. So I'm just taking all the shims out and actually recording what numbers they are, and then I can actually swap them around to get the best option. So this number 2 exhaust was a little bit tight before, and I couldn't manage to do it by swapping around the shims from this engine, so I did actually find some on the other motor which was slightly smaller, and I've got them in here, and this is 20 thou now, which is, well, it's just over 20 thou, about 21, which is pretty good. It's actually a little bit looser than the stock specs, and the inlets are looser than the stock specs as well, but this engine, it is going to be getting a lot hotter, so I would actually rather have them on the looser side. So I'm actually really happy with where they are. These are about 0.22 mil and these are about 0.15, 16, so that's about where I want it. That's in there, that's tight, that's in there. We can put the cylinder head cover on. I don't call it a tappet cover or a cam cover. If you call it a cylinder head cover, you can't go wrong because it's covering the cylinder head. Not that it matters what anything's called anyway. I believe you can actually do this with the engine in the bike, And on the bobber it's a pain because you've got the frame goes over like that and you've got all the wires and stuff on it. We probably have on the other bikes as well, but I think you can do it. You probably just got to take a load of wiring and stuff out of the way. I might give it a go later to see if it's feasible, if I feel like it. But I might not, because it does look like a right pain in the arse. Right, that can go back in. Right, that's that then. It was a bit of a long video, but maybe you prefer long videos. Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed, like this video, and comment, because I will get back to you. And there's a link in the description to all the other stuff I do, or even if you want to reach out to me. So I'm really looking forward to actually cranking up the boost on this motor to 15 psi. But before we do that, we're going to get it to the drag strip in just over a week's time with the big pulley on it running 9 psi. I'm probably going to up the timing a little bit as well, and we'll see what we get out of it. It should be low 11s, and hopefully I'm aiming to get into the 10s with it with 9 psi boost. So that's going to be interesting. So stay healthy, drink plenty of water, and have a great day.